Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most explosive and daring sabotage operations of the Russia-Ukraine war, one that perfectly represents how modern warfare is evolving from open battlefields to shadow operations behind enemy lines. According to multiple reports, Ukrainian special units carried out a meticulously planned mission that resulted in the destruction of a Russian fuel train carrying over 1,000 tons of diesel. The operation was executed using planted mines on a key railway route inside Russia, flipping an entire train and setting off a chain reaction of explosions that lit up the night sky. This was not a random act of destruction, but a calculated strike, targeting the lifeblood of Russian logistics fuel that powers tanks, aircraft and transport vehicles. Every liter of diesel lost weakens Russia's ability to sustain its long front lines. From the very first images captured after the blast, it was clear this was an extraordinary event. Flames towered high above the wreckage. Smoke billowed for hours, and emergency units struggled to contain the fire. The exterior scene was apocalyptic. Twisted metal rails ripped apart, and multiple wagons thrown sideways like toys. By the force of the explosion, witnesses from nearby villages said the ground shook for minutes and the night turned orange from the intense heat. This wasn't just an accident, it was an intentional strike, executed with precision. The railway itself served as a critical corridor, connecting fuel depots to frontline supply routes, meaning its destruction would ripple across multiple military districts and paralyze transport for days, possibly weeks. The details of how the operation unfolded remain partly classified, but experts suggest that Ukrainian operatives either infiltrated the area days before to plant pressure mines or deployed unmanned systems capable of laying charges remotely. This would have required both exceptional planning and intimate knowledge of Russian rail schedules and cargo manifests. Such intelligence is usually obtained through satellite surveillance, intercepted communications, or local resistance networks within Russian territory. It demonstrates that Ukraine has developed not only advanced battlefield tactics, but also a strong intelligence network capable of operating deep inside enemy lines. This is the kind of operation that requires patience, precision, and absolute secrecy. One wrong move could have exposed the entire mission before detonation. Inside the train itself, the situation was catastrophic. Once the mines detonated, the impact ripped through the undercarriage of the first tankers, sending a wave of shock and heat through the rest of the convoy. The interior of the wagons, which were packed tightly with fuel, had no protection against such a blast. Fuel vapor ignited instantly, creating a cascading explosion. Each tanker acted as a bomb, multiplying the destruction in seconds. The train's interior compartments melted and collapsed, leaving nothing recognizable crews on the scene. Later described finding only twisted frames and scorched remnants. The inferno burned uncontrollably for several hours, consuming all 1,000 tons of diesel and releasing massive plumes of smoke visible from over 20 kilometers away. This act of sabotage reveals much about performance and precision in modern warfare. Ukraine's armed forces have been steadily improving their deep strike capabilities, and this event is a clear example of how strategic sabotage can achieve what artillery sometimes cannot, by destroying a single train. Ukraine inflicted a logistical and psychological wound far greater than a typical battlefield loss. Russian supply chains are heavily dependent on rail networks because of the country's size and limited road infrastructure. When one of those lines is hit, especially one carrying energy resources, the damage cascades through the entire system. Frontline units face fuel shortages, vehicles are immobilized, and timetables for reinforcements are disrupted. The performance of this operation was near flawless. There were no reported casualties among Ukrainian forces, no detectable warning signs, and no immediate arrests by Russian security services. It was clean, efficient, and devastating. The explosion also exposed serious flaws in Russian safety measures. There were virtually no effective safety features in place to protect such a critical transport asset. Trains carrying hazardous materials should normally have armored undercarriages, sensor systems for mine detection, and at least minimal escort or aerial surveillance, yet none of that was present. This reflects overconfidence or negligence in Russia's internal security protocols, even though previous attacks on pipelines and depots had already shown that Ukraine was capable of striking deep inside Russia. The lack of adaptive security meant the same vulnerabilities persisted. This absence of countermeasures turned what could have been a contained incident into a catastrophic chain reaction. The Russian railway system is vast but increasingly fragile as more such operations target its weakest links. Another crucial aspect is the psychological effect of this event. For years, Russia has projected the image of invulnerability within its borders, claiming that its vast territory and security apparatus made it immune to foreign strikes. This train explosion shattered that illusion. Ordinary Russians are now seeing with their own eyes that the war has reached their homeland. The burning train became a symbol of vulnerability, spreading fear and uncertainty among transport operators, fuel suppliers, and even civilians living near key infrastructure targets. The message was clear: nowhere is safe, and that fear alone has strategic value. It forces Russia to divert troops and resources to internal security, reducing its capacity at the front lines and stretching its logistics network even thinner. In analyzing the unique aspects of this operation, what stands out is how Ukraine combined technology, intelligence, and timing. The use of planted mines, rather than direct drone or missile strikes, allowed the attackers to remain undetected. Mines can be laid quietly and triggered remotely or through mechanical pressure. This reduces exposure and costs while maximizing effect. It also makes attribution difficult, giving Ukraine plausible deniability, at least in public forums. From a military standpoint, this is a masterclass in cost-effective warfare, where minimal resources are used to inflict disproportionate damage. The operation's unique selling point is its precision and efficiency. It showed that Ukraine does not need to rely solely on Western-supplied weapons to achieve high-impact results. Homegrown intelligence and engineering ingenuity are equally powerful. The financial aspect of this operation cannot be ignored. The cost of planting and detonating the mines would have been minuscule compared to the economic losses Russia suffered. Losing 1,000 tons of diesel translates into millions of dollars gone instantly. Plus the repair of rail infrastructure, replacement of rolling stock, and cleanup of environmental contamination add even more to the total cost on top of that. The disruption of fuel deliveries to forward bases has its own hidden price, delaying troop movements and reducing operational efficiency for weeks. This economic asymmetry, where small investments yield massive enemy losses, is one of the defining features of modern asymmetric warfare. Ukraine has mastered this principle through repeated precision strikes that target the heart of Russian logistics. Looking deeper into the symbolic implications, this incident represents a broader shift in how Ukraine conducts the war early in the conflict. Ukraine relied heavily on defensive operations, repelling advances and holding territory. But as the war dragged on, the need for strategic disruption became apparent, hitting deep into Russian logistics chains, changes the rhythm of the conflict. It creates unpredictability for Russian planners and forces them into a reactive posture. Instead of dictating the tempo of war, they now have to anticipate hidden threats everywhere along their own transport routes. Every convoy becomes a potential target, every engineer or maintenance worker a suspect. The paranoia this breeds is almost as damaging as the physical destruction itself, because it erodes morale and trust within Russia's military and civilian infrastructure systems. The train explosion also demonstrates how warfare has evolved beyond traditional battlefields into the realms of intelligence and engineering. This wasn't a battle fought with tanks and rifles. It was fought with timing sensors, explosives, and data. Understanding where the train would be, how much it carried, and when it would pass required an advanced fusion of information from multiple sources, including satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and likely local informants. Each layer of this intelligence web had to work perfectly to synchronize the detonation. The success of this mission confirms that Ukraine's intelligence network is deep, sophisticated, and highly capable of conducting operations within the Russian mainland. From an operational standpoint, this attack will force Russia to overhaul its internal security strategy. They may now begin reinforcing railway routes, installing counter-sabotage systems, and deploying patrol drones. But these adaptations come at a high cost. Guarding every kilometer of track across a country the size of Russia is practically impossible, which means that every additional measure drains resources that could have been used elsewhere. Ukraine's strategy thus achieves a double victory, not only destroying a valuable target, but forcing the enemy into a costly defensive posture. A similar approach has been observed in other conflicts where the weaker side uses small, precise attacks to force the stronger side into expensive overcompensation. The same principle is now visible here, and it's working effectively. The environmental impact of the explosion is another layer of consequence. The burning of 1,000 tons of diesel released a vast amount of toxic smoke and residue into the surrounding area, contaminating soil and water supplies. Local reports suggest that firefighting teams struggled to contain the blaze because the explosion destroyed nearby water sources and pipelines. The long-term cleanup could take months, adding yet another burden to Russia's already stretched emergency infrastructure. These cascading effects illustrate how a single strike can create a web of problems: logistical, economic, environmental, and psychological, all from one well-timed explosion. It's also worth noting the growing sophistication of Ukrainian sabotage teams. Over the last year, they have conducted multiple covert attacks inside Russia, targeting air bases, power plants, and fuel depots. But this railway operation stands out because it combined multiple tactics: infiltration, demolition, and psychological warfare. It was a demonstration that Ukraine can reach anywhere, at any time, with the right intel. Diligence and preparation even without using long-range missiles or advanced drones. This adaptability and resourcefulness form the backbone of Ukraine's survival and success against a much larger adversary. It's warfare built on creativity and precision, not brute force. As we reflect on the broader meaning of this event, it becomes clear that this operation was not just about destroying fuel. It was about sending a message that logistics lines are now fair game, that the war's front lines no longer exist, only on maps. The destruction of the train underscores a new reality. In modern conflict, infrastructure is as critical a target as soldiers or tanks. Energy supplies, communication routes, and transport systems all become weapons when manipulated effectively. This shift redefines how nations must think about defense. It's no longer enough to have strong armies if your internal networks are vulnerable from within. In conclusion, the operation where Ukraine planted mines on a Russian railway, flipping a train and blowing up 1,000 tons of diesel, is a milestone in modern asymmetric warfare. It demonstrates the effectiveness of intelligence-driven strategy, the vulnerabilities of overextended supply chains, and the power of precision over quantity. The attack crippled logistics, caused millions in damage, and spread fear throughout the Russian interior. But beyond material losses, it delivered a psychological shock, showing that even deep inside Russia, there are cracks that can be exploited. It is a reminder that wars today are not just fought with bullets and missiles, but with information, patience, and engineering brilliance. This was a statement of capability and resolve, an assertion that Ukraine's reach extends far beyond its borders, and that no supply line, no matter how deep inside enemy territory, is truly safe. As the conflict continues, we can expect more operations like this ones that redefine the boundaries of warfare and test the resilience of both sides. This explosion was not the end, but a signal that the war's most strategic battles are now being fought in silence, in the dark, and with